Welcome to the Social Network Show. We're here on location at the Social Media Strategy Summit, and today it's day one. I'm here with Dr. Nat. You had a workshop today.
I did. It was great. It was social media ROI.
Tell me all about it, because I noticed there were some amazing companies from Walt Disney to a bank from Nigeria, and then the Department of Tourism. Those are great companies that are here.
Well, and they came really because they're looking to figure out, how do I increase my budget? How do I justify my budget? How do I calculate ROI? And so we went through our 7-step process, and we helped people start to think about, how do you give attribution? How do you say, here's the business value, so that you can really expand what you're doing?
And you know what, something that I found very interesting is that you incorporate, you engage your audience. It's exactly what you're telling them that they need to do. You do it during your presentation. You're able to have a personal touch to what you're talking about, but you really explain the process and how to use all these steps to get their budget and their ROIs.
Well, I've been talking about social media ROI for a long time, and for geeks like me that have PhDs in engineering, it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. It's one of those topics everybody wants to know the answer, but they don't really want to sit through the math. And so I've been toying with how best to tell the story. And so what I decided to do is, for each of the concepts, I pulled upon some of my own experiences to be able to illustrate those stories and the principles. And so far, the feedback has really been great.
Yes, I actually experienced it myself. I asked a lot of people, and they were very, very impressed with your presentation. Very engaging. That's what they had to say. And I agree with them. It was that personal touch made a huge difference from a lot of the presentations. So congrats to you, Dr. Nat. Thank you. So tell us, there was more workshops, and you had an opportunity to speak to other people.
Right. So one of the great things about this conference is there are so many amazing speakers here. And one in particular that we just got to talk to is Kelley. And she's an attorney, and her specialty, she's an intellectual property attorney, so trademarks, patents, all that kind of stuff. And she's now specialized in the law around social media. So from 2 points of view, one is around employees and what are their rights. So if you have a Twitter handle and you go to work for somebody who owns that Twitter handle, right? And then also looking from the employer's point of view, what kind of guidance or rules. You don't want to be overbearing as a company.
There's a fine line, yes.
There's a fine line, and we're really we're doing a dance between what makes sense, what is culturally okay within an organization. So what Kelley did was she really gave us some really solid advice, and it looks like we're going to be collaborating.
Well, that sounds great. Why don't we go take a look and see what she said to you?
I'm here with Kelley, and I just sat through an amazing workshop that she did about the legality. I just sat through a workshop on the legalities of social media, and this woman is absolutely brilliant. I can't wait to start working with her. And I really wanted to interview you because I wanted to understand, what do you think the top 3 things are that companies do not understand about social media and the law?
They do not understand why they need them. They do not understand exactly how to create them, and they do not understand how to enforce them in an environment that is friendly to employees and also legal in a way that is creates fair boundaries and isn't overbearing, but actually helpful for them in being able to enforce the policies that they have.
So in social media, it's kind of this, it feels like a free-for-all. And I know a lot of companies are unsure of the boundaries. They're unsure of how much control they can have over their employees. And they're also very interested in brand protection. They're interested in their brand equity. And so it almost seems like having employees be out there in the social world is in conflict with a brand's priorities. What do you see on the landscape?
I see it quite the opposite. I think the more that employees are out on the landscape and more that employers embrace that and promote that and jump on board with using social media platforms to enhance and promote their brands and to encourage employee interaction and employee engagement is actually a really, really, really important move forward for healthy workplaces, which also in turn creates a huge return on investment of employee time. When you have happy employees, you have a much stronger, you have a stronger brand, you have a stronger opportunity to just really, really get a strong ROI on the work that your employees are doing.
Well, I would agree. And, I'm the ROI queen, just like you're the legal queen. And what we find is companies that do engage in social media, they have better relationships with their customers, they increase their sales, they decrease their marketing and PR costs. And if you also look at employee productivity, employee loyalty, employee attrition, all those things go in the direction that they want to. But yet I still see a lot of companies going, well, I don't know. We don't know what to do about our social media policy. So if I was a company and I was sitting on the fence and I was hearing, okay, I can improve my business with all these things that social media can do for us, what would be the first step for someone who's on the fence about having a social media policy and allowing employees to be able to interact in social media?
I think the first thing they need to understand is that if they don't get on board, their employees will. So do they want to define their brand, or do they want their employees to define their brand for them?
I think that's really important. And what you talked about in the workshop was the idea of creating some guidelines and boundaries. And what I loved about your approach was it wasn't so strict that it didn't seem like regular, normal human beings. It wasn't like so by the letter of the law that it didn't make any sense. It made complete sense. And that's what I loved about what you talked about. And it seems like there's this idea of being able to communicate what companies' policies are, what their rules are, but in a way that doesn't, I guess social media is this new revolution where people feel like they have freedom. But if you restrict them too much, then you're not being authentic and genuine. So it sounds to me like there's room for companies to enforce rules, have policies, governance, without making employees feel like they're stifled. Do you think that's the case?
I think that's the case, exactly. And I think there's a couple of important points to make. As I mentioned during the workshop, this country was founded on promoting the creativity of its people. And our laws have been written from the earliest days with that in mind. And the spirit of the law is always to promote ingenuity and creativity. And nothing has changed. And we need to remember that as we encourage lawmakers, as we're trying to sort of move through this new and unpredictable space. It's also a lot like the Wild Wild West right now. Everybody's run out with the Oklahoma land grab. They've put their stake in the ground, but there isn't a sheriff in town, so to speak, to help rein in the lawlessness. We're in a highly unregulated environment. The National Labor Relations Board is struggling to understand how social media policies are, how they can be positive for employees and actually make sure that they promote employee rights and that they don't infringe on their rights that they have had for a long time under U.S. labor laws. So it's very, very important for us to embrace the law, but also operate within what I call a zone of fairness. And we talked about that in the workshop, that when we set boundaries that are reasonable and make sense, and both sides understand what the boundaries are and why, then everybody is happier and we have a higher functioning environment.
And I think one of the things that we looked at was about this idea of creating a policy, a governing body, and really looking at how do we normally do business and what are fair practices. So you could look at what are the employee handbooks saying about email, about phone, about the standard ways that we conduct business. And now we're going to layer on social media. So talk a little bit about employee handbooks and what do companies need to know about creating those.
It's very important to have employee handbooks that lay out what the expectations are of the employer and of the employee during work hours and what their responsibility is to the brand. And when you're able to incorporate rules of the road for social media into those handbooks, you have a higher rate of responsiveness to those policies, because it is well understood in our culture that employers tend to have employee handbooks. So if we simply extend those policies, which are all about workplace productivity, if you're using email for personal purposes, it's taking you away from the work that you're paid to be doing. And it's the same thing if you're using social media to promote your personal life in any way, shape, or form. You're simply taking away from workplace productivity, as opposed to creating a culture of punishment and a culture of discipline. So employee handbooks are important. They help explain exactly what the expectations are. And when we add social media into them, we have a higher rate of success.
That makes perfect sense. We talked a little bit about the return on investment for social media, and one of the things that we're seeing a lot of companies coming to us for is the ability to prevent brand damage. So let's say you have a rogue employee that's tweeting something or someone makes a mistake. What are you seeing with respect to creating policies or monitoring? How can brands really prevent these crises?
In many ways, they can't prevent them, but they can expect them, and they can be in a position to respond to them quickly. So plan for the unexpected and have your responses ready. So be prepared, be proactive, so that you are not in a position where you're having to be reactive. I think I used the analogy during the workshop. Make sure you put enough gas in the car before you take the trip. Don't have to stop and fill up along the way. Know how long the distance is and be prepared for it.
And I think a lot of companies don't realize that they need maybe dark sites because there's, people go to Google to search on it. I've seen companies say to me, well, let's just take down the posts, which then leads to even bigger problems because then brands are accused of not being authentic. So what are some rules for CEOs? What do they really need to know about this?
I think it's the most important thing that they need to know is that the conversation is generally very, very real on social media platforms. It is what it is, and people tend to be extremely honest. They are the nature of communicating through Facebook or Twitter or even on LinkedIn, which tends to have a little bit of a different bent, is very casual in nature as opposed to crafting formal emails. And so I think that CEOs should embrace the fact that this is the response of employees, this is the response of customers, and then simply state if there is a post that's negative, but it does not violate any type of First Amendment issue, it's not defamatory in any way, that they should respond to it. And then they can also respond how they followed through on that particular grievance. And I think monitoring and managing is one of the most important things that a CEO can do, and have teams that are responsible for that and giving them live, up-to-date, current information that isn't old and stale.
I can't believe how much we're in alignment. We have 7 steps that we use when we advise clients. Step number 1 is monitoring and listening. And even, an advanced thought would be to have a command center where you're continually looking at the information. So if there is an issue, you can respond to it really quickly. So you can kind of, cut it off very quickly. And then really looking at going in a positive direction, really building brand advocacy, and then using social media for what it was originally intended for, which is great word of mouth.
Well, I agree 100%. And if we take it and we harness it and use it for our good, then we're in a much better position than if we allow others to decide what our reputation is, what our stances are, and what kind of company we are or what type of organization we are. If we get on top of it, we get out in front, and we take responsibility and accept the fact that we are operating in a new environment, that it is we're no longer just listening to radios and we're no longer just watching televisions, but we're communicating in a different way, and accept that the world has changed, then it'll be a smoother sailing forward.
So thank you, Kelley, so much. You're the most intelligent attorney I have ever interviewed. I really look forward to collaborating with you and really helping all these companies figure this whole thing out.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for taking time to be with me, and I am honored to be collaborating with you, and I look forward to helping these companies do great things in this fabulous new media world.
Stay tuned. So Kelley's workshop was really fantastic. I think everyone in the room took away some amazing points, really looking at balancing that authentic, genuine communication that companies need to do, but also employing principles that help the employees feel like they're authentically engaged. And, everybody was asking great questions. We did like a little workshop kind of exercise, and I think people got a lot out of it.
Great. Well, I can't wait for day 2. We're going to have huge companies tomorrow. Keynote speaker, American Express. So that is amazing.